Hello everyone, welcome in. This is bonus 1, human body drawing, torso drawing, and human body description in Chyan's Coloso class, drawing and coloring anime style characters with Chyan. So welcome in guys. First and foremost, I just want to front with an apology. It's been a little bit busy. I've had mechanical issues with my car, been trying to plan out my UI UX approach for the spring once I finish with school, and I've been trying to figure out if I need to keep or remove my second job out of the equation. It's just been a lot of personal things going on, so I apologize for the delay in these videos, but in any case, you can always keep on top of news regarding possible delays, updates, or other content on any of my socials, or just by subscribing on my channel, whichever you prefer, but in any case, I just hope these reviews help. So getting right into today's lecture, it was mainly just a large series of tips on drawing torsos and human heads, as well as just some general design tips from Chyan himself. But this was honestly a really cool class, and I can't express enough how much I was fanboying just watching his study process about how Chyan approached studying the human body and representing it, and especially the nuances that he showed with a lot of his contours. Really impressive stuff. So if you guys are following along in the Coloso class, I highly recommend you guys just watch through the lecture. It's super mesmerizing to just watch through. But diving right into the notes, we're going to start with tips on the torso. So generally fixing the limbs isn't hard, but the torso is, so you want to dial in the torso to start because it's going to also essentially create the vibe that you get, or the action pose of your character. Practice rotating different parts and understanding their appearance from different angles, and especially for more difficult aspects like the pelvis. He kind of goes into how the pelvis is shaped like a heart from the front, like we covered in the human anatomy section of his class. However, depending on different angles from anything besides the frontal view, you're going to see that pelvis really start to distort in the shape and how you draw it. So it's important that you really dial in that figure because it's going to help really maintain the shape of the lower body to the upper body. And with that, you can twist the upper and lower body, and it actually makes for good practice as it's more dynamic and more common for action poses. So especially if you want to practice more dynamic posing, Chyan highly recommends just practicing with more. Keep in mind, abs stick out from the upper belly, lower belly, and hip joint, so if you're trying to draw more muscular characters, that is really good to know. And the direction of turn between the upper body and pelvis is usually only around 50 to 20 degrees, so don't over twist it between the upper and lower body, because it can look a little distortionist, and even for really flexible characters, it's not often you're going to really draw them, so make sure your characters are still looking natural, even in a dynamic pose. The neck bone is wider from front to back and is sharp in nature, so this will help you dial in the appearance of the neck in proportion to the head. And drawing the upper torso stressed forwards is common for action poses, and so it's good to really practice angling of the upper torso as well. The belly button changes appearance in accordance with the angle it is being drawn from, so Chyan really shows this from a bottom-up view where the belly button kind of turns into a small curve versus a frontal view where it's kind of shown in like a long drawn-out I shape because it follows along the curve of the stomach. Just some stuff to keep in mind as you start drawing more nuanced details on the figure. The legs are naturally wider towards the back and more narrow at the front, so you can really see this again from another bottom-up perspective. You're not really going to see this from a frontal view, but from things like a bottom-up, it's really important to note that from anything besides that frontal view, the legs aren't going to look like a perfect cylinder when viewed from most other views, so keep that in mind. And then practice contours as a way to express different body types and understanding of muscle groups. That's going to be your really small fine lines that kind of express a deeper understanding of the different parts of the body in different aspects rather than just drawing the outline of the figure as a whole. Practice attaching the arms from various angles as well in the upper body by utilizing the neck, traps, and shoulders and the rotation to assist the limbs. So keep in mind anytime you're moving or swinging the arms, the shoulder and the neck and the traps, because they're all connected and they move with the arm as well, and that upper torso are going to move with that arm. So it's really good in practicing range of motion and expressing the upper torso in a way that still looks natural. And then back to the upper torso with the lower torso. When bending the body moves around only 20 to 30 degrees, and the pelvis and ribs contribute very little to these extremes of the bend, and the legs do most of it. So keep in mind when you're drawing, especially characters that are curled up, maybe they've got their legs closer to their chest, their pelvis and their ribs aren't going to be slanted, and they're actually going to keep pretty straight as you follow down the character's spine, and you're really going to see that big bend towards the glutes and as the knees are brought up to the front of the face. And then we get into a little bit of the good stuff if you're looking to draw anything a little more spicy, but when drawing breasts, keep the point of attachment the same towards the top part of the chest, but make the underside curl inwards as size increases. This will help retain the iconic shape of the breasts as you increase the size of them as well. You want to draw the flat attachment part of the breast clearly to announce the curve. So that's going to be the part that is pronounced from the top of the shoulders close to the armpit. And then breasts will generally create a Y shape between them. This is a shape made quite literally implied as the crease made between them, but that shape will actually vary depending on the form and pose, as well as any clothing or any other factors that might be affecting the character's breasts. As well as the direction of them are going to be decided by the direction of the ribs with different directions. So you want to keep in mind they're not facing the same way. So unlike your eye pupils, you do want them pointing out in different directions, and the direction of the ribs, what's meant by this is that because the breasts actually rest on essentially the top section of the ribs, whatever direction the ribs are pointed, the breasts are going to follow along suit because they're pretty much attached to them at that point. And then getting back to the hips, when drawing them from the back, the legs are fattest below the hips at around 1/3 the length of the leg down. And you'll notice you'll actually see that point a little bit below the character's crotch. So if that's above, you'll know that your hip placement's a little too high. Besides the side angles, the hips generally don't stick out too much on diagonal and frontal angles unless they've got really, really extreme proportions or are in a very, very strange pose. So keep in mind you don't want to be overdoing it on the deformation or stylistic changes of the hips. And then the outline of them will change depending on the angle of the legs as the fat pulls to the outline. You'll really see this with characters in like a large stride, or maybe they're stretching their legs. You'll see that the fat towards their glutes and their hips are going to stretch alongside that leg, or whichever limb is stretched out, because the fat's going to carry alongside it and is being pulled down by the rest of that limb. And then be aware of other factors of force being applied on different parts of the body as you draw it. So if your character is pressed against a wall, keep in mind what protruding parts of the body may be touching it and how that may affect their appearance, as well as other forces like momentum if things are swinging around, or gravity naturally as things are being pulled down. And then just a really good solid tip that'll lead into the self-assigned homework for this lesson review. But 10 torsos and 10 heads make for a good warm-up that Chyan does personally before he gets into his large illustration drawing. And he states that that normally takes him around half an hour to an hour. Now into some tips for the head. When drawing the head, you want to practice in different angles, of course. And when drawing a side view, the face is generally deformed the most as the facial features stick out quite a lot. So keep in mind that you're really going to be pushing the stylistic changes we make for anime style illustration and characters around side views. For studies and relevance for commercial purposes, if you've got like an open study portfolio that you want to show your employer, you generally want to try various expressions and hairstyles as well to show them your creative design and character design as well. And then understanding the more detailed expressions and nuances to old characters will make younger characters much easier to show and appeal. And this is kind of a repeating pattern in general in many other topics in life. But for Chyan, he really mentions that you kind of have to have a deeper grasp and understanding of facial features and how to deform them for older characters, because they're going to protrude and show a lot more with things like wrinkles, as opposed to younger characters where you can kind of get away with smoother surfaces and such, and omitting a lot of personal details on the face. So by understanding the harder cases to draw, it'll make the easier ones way easier in comparison, and you'll know specifically what to change if you're looking to add more style to that face as well. And then just a final parting note, creases are all about repetition patterns, as we covered in the last section, I believe. So study them, and especially for different types of materials, understand what patterns may be more prevalent in thinner, thicker, softer, harder materials, and so forth. So as a quick summary to everything, practice, and a lot of practice. Chyan mentions just practice. You really want to build up that intuition of knowing where something feels right or wrong and where to change it. And really you want to view it as drawing the same human body over and over again, just with adjustment to the individual characteristics of whatever character you're drawing. By understanding that, the very characters that we draw will have a fundamental basis of consistency to all of them, and it'll make it way easier to draw and keep a consistent style to show for your work. You want to dial in basic form for both the body and head, and then practice more nuanced details as you start progressing in your understanding and representation of that. And then you want to understand the limitations to deformers or stylistic changes, and respect anatomical boundaries to maintain aesthetically pleasing characters. This is pretty much just the underlying concept of what we talked about the hips from a side view, which is, yes, you may have characters that may have really, really protruding hips from any other view than a frontal view, but do keep in mind that it's not often, and you're going to be pushing the anatomical boundaries for what would still look aesthetically pleasing for your characters. So yes, do make stylistic changes, and especially depending on the character, but keep in mind that your drawings, first and foremost, are to appeal to either an employer or to the public, unless you're really just drawing for yourself, which go crazy, but for the rest of us looking to put out work out to others, it's important that we really keep that in mind. And then, as mentioned earlier, the self-assigned homework that I thought was appropriate is to just practice a round of Chyan's warm-up style with 10 quick torso and head drawings. So that was a pretty quick rundown of the first bonus section in Chyan's class. Hopefully this really helped you guys out, and like said, super insightful stuff to really watch him through his process and how he draws his own studies. So if you're watching along in the class, I would highly recommend you could even just mute it and just observe. Super cool stuff to watch. And I get that I'm fanboying over Chyan, but I love his style and I love his attention to detail when it comes down to his studies, and I think they'd make a really great resource for others as well. And then after this, we're going to be starting section 3 and producing a design that matches the tone of a character. So we're pretty much going to be refining the back end of our theory and getting into the design aspects that Chyan really considers as he begins moving past just the drafting stage of his illustrations. So really exciting stuff, and I really hope to see you guys in the next lecture review as we start into that section. But in any case, thank you guys so much again for joining into this lecture review, and hopefully we'll be studying in together in the next one. As always, I hope you have a good day. Make sure to take it easy. Bye-bye.